Behind the epic battle scenes and stirring performances lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets. From a Zulu princess drawing battle plans in sand to an anachronistic Tom Jones song played to confused extras, the making of this classic war film was stranger than fiction. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Zulu. Fact 1. Michael Caine's worst screen test ever. When Michael Caine walked into his audition for Zulu in 1963, he had no idea he was about to deliver what the director would later call the worst screen test he had ever witnessed. Caine, who was 29 years old at the time and still struggling to make it as an actor, was originally being considered for the role of Private Henry Hook, a rough soldier who would eventually go to James Booth. But during his screen test for the more prominent role of Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. According to Caine himself, he was extremely nervous during the audition, and it showed in every possible way. Director Cy Enfield, an American filmmaker who had moved to Britain after being blacklisted in Hollywood during the McCarthy era, watched as Caine stumbled through his lines and struggled to embody the character of an upper-class British officer. The performance was so poor that Enfield felt compelled to tell Caine directly that it was the worst screen test he had ever seen in his entire career as a director. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn that would change Caine's life forever. Despite the disastrous audition, Enfield made the decision to cast Caine in the role anyway. The reason was purely practical rather than artistic. The production was scheduled to leave for South Africa very soon to begin filming, and they still hadn't found anyone else suitable for the part of Bromhead. With time running out and no other viable candidates, Enfield took a gamble on the young actor whose screen test had been so memorably awful. This decision proved to be one of the most fortunate casting choices in film history, as Caine's performance as the aristocratic Lieutenant Bromhead became his breakthrough role and launched him into international stardom. Fact 2. A Zulu princess drew the battle strategy. When director Cy Enfield was preparing to film the epic battle sequences for Zulu, he faced a major challenge in accurately recreating the military tactics used during the actual Battle of Rorke's Drift in 1879. Rather than relying solely on written historical accounts or guesswork, Enfield made an extraordinary decision that would ensure the film's battle scenes were as authentic as possible. He brought in a very special technical advisor who possessed knowledge that no history book could provide. This advisor was a Zulu princess who also served as the official historian of her tribe, making her uniquely qualified to understand exactly how the battle had unfolded nearly a century earlier. The princess had inherited detailed knowledge of Zulu military strategies and tactics that had been passed down through generations within her royal family, including the specific formations and movements used during the famous siege at Rorke's Drift. When it came time to plan the complex battle choreography for the film, the princess demonstrated her knowledge in a remarkably simple yet effective way. She knelt down on the ground and began drawing the entire battle strategy directly in the sand, using her hands to create detailed diagrams that showed exactly how the Zulu warriors had positioned themselves and moved during their attack on the British outpost. Her drawings included the placement of different warrior groups, the timing of various assault waves, and the tactical formations that the Zulu army had employed. Enfield was so impressed by the accuracy and detail of her sand drawings that he made the decision to follow them precisely when filming the battle scenes. Every camera angle, every movement of the Zulu extras, and every tactical maneuver shown in the movie was shot exactly as the princess had drawn it in the sand. Fact 3. Stanley Baker owned the real Victoria Cross. Stanley Baker, the Welsh actor who starred as Lieutenant John Chard in Zulu, owned something that connected him directly to the real-life hero he portrayed on screen. From 1972 until his death in 1976, Baker possessed John Chard's actual Victoria Cross medal, along with other military decorations that had belonged to the original Royal Engineer who commanded the defense of Rorke's Drift. The Victoria Cross is Britain's highest military honor, awarded for exceptional bravery in the face of enemy action, and Lieutenant John Chard received his for his leadership during the famous battle that inspired the film. Baker had acquired the medal collection believing he was purchasing what collectors call a cast copy, which is essentially a replica made from the same molds as the original medals but not the actual award given to the recipient. For years, Baker treasured these medals as historical artifacts, though he assumed they were reproductions rather than the genuine items. However, after Baker's death, experts decided to conduct a series of detailed tests on the Victoria Cross to determine its authenticity. These scientific examinations involved analyzing the metal composition, manufacturing techniques, and other characteristics that would distinguish an original medal from a later reproduction. The results of these tests revealed something remarkable that would have thrilled Baker if he had lived to learn about it. The Victoria Cross in his collection was not a replica at all, but rather the actual medal that had been pinned on Lieutenant John Chard's chest by Queen Victoria herself in recognition of his heroic actions at Rorke's Drift. The tragic irony of this discovery is that Stanley Baker, who had spent 4 years owning and cherishing what he thought was merely a copy of this prestigious military decoration, died never knowing that he had possessed the genuine Victoria Cross of the very man he had brought to life on the big screen. Fact 4. The movie created a camera crane company. When director Cy Enfield began planning the filming of Zulu in the remote locations of South Africa, he encountered a technical problem that would inadvertently lead to the creation of one of the film industry's most important equipment companies. Enfield needed sweeping camera movements to capture the epic scale of thousands of Zulu warriors advancing across the landscape. But the existing camera cranes of the early 1960s were far too heavy and bulky to transport through the African wilderness to their filming locations. Traditional camera cranes at that time were massive pieces of equipment designed for use in controlled studio environments, where weight and portability were not major concerns. However, filming Zulu required equipment that could be broken down into manageable pieces, carried through rough terrain, and then reassembled on location in the middle of nowhere. Enfield realized that no existing crane could meet these demanding requirements for his ambitious production. This challenge led Enfield to approach Ken Eddy, a skilled engineer and equipment designer, with a very specific request. Enfield explained that he needed a camera crane that would be lightweight when taken apart, easy to transport through the African bush, yet still capable of providing smooth, professional camera movements when assembled. Eddy took on this challenge and began designing what would become known as the first Filmair Giraffe camera crane. The crane that Eddy created for Zulu was revolutionary in its design, featuring a modular construction that could be disassembled for transport and quickly rebuilt on location. The success of this custom-built equipment on the Zulu production impressed other filmmakers and equipment rental companies, leading to orders for additional cranes. What had started as a one-off solution for a single movie gradually evolved into Filmair International, which became the world's best-known and most respected camera crane company, with their equipment still being used on major film productions around the globe today. Fact 5. James Booth never went to South Africa. James Booth delivered one of the most memorable performances in Zulu as Private Henry Hook, the rebellious soldier who redeems himself through acts of heroism during the battle, but remarkably, the actor never set foot in South Africa during the entire production of the film. While most of the cast and crew spent months filming on location in the dramatic landscapes of Natal Province, Booth remained in England and shot all of his scenes at Twickenham Film Studios in Middlesex. This unusual arrangement came about because of the specific nature of Booth's character and the scenes he appeared in throughout the movie. Private Hook was primarily confined to the field hospital at Rorke's Drift, which meant that most of his important scenes took place inside buildings rather than in the sweeping outdoor locations that required the South African shoot. The filmmakers realized they could recreate the interior hospital scenes much more cost-effectively in a controlled studio environment back in England. By keeping Booth in England, the production saved significant money on travel expenses, accommodation, and the logistical challenges of coordinating his schedule with the complex South African filming. The studio at Twickenham allowed the filmmakers to build detailed interior sets that matched the outdoor locations perfectly, and they could film Booth scenes with better lighting control and sound quality than would have been possible in the remote African locations. The seamless integration of Booth's studio work with the location footage is a testament to the skill of the filmmakers and editors. When watching the finished film, viewers have no idea that Hook's dramatic scenes defending the hospital were filmed thousands of miles away from where the outdoor battle sequences were shot. Booth's powerful performance as the reluctant hero who rises to the occasion remains one of the film's highlights, even though he never experienced the intense atmosphere of filming in the actual African wilderness where the story took place. Fact 6. Silent movies taught Zulus about acting. When the filmmakers of Zulu arrived in South Africa to begin production, they faced an unexpected challenge that had nothing to do with the complex battle scenes or difficult locations. The 240 Zulu extras who had been hired to portray the warriors in the film had never seen a movie in their entire lives, which meant they had absolutely no understanding of what it meant to act for a camera or how films were made. This presented a serious problem for the production because the Zulu warriors needed to deliver convincing performances that would bring the historical battle to life on screen. The extras were confused about why they were being asked to perform certain actions repeatedly, why cameras were pointed at them from different angles, and how their individual movements would eventually be combined to create a complete story that audiences would watch in theaters around the world. Stanley Baker, who was not only starring in the film but also serving as one of its producers, came up with a creative solution to help the Zulu extras understand the concept of movie making. He arranged for outdoor screenings where he showed them classic silent comedy films, specifically choosing movies starring Harold Lloyd, the comedy team of Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, and the brilliant physical comedian Buster Keaton. These silent films were perfect teaching tools because they relied heavily on visual storytelling and physical comedy that could be understood without needing to follow complex dialogue or cultural references. The Zulu extras were fascinated and delighted by these screenings, particularly enjoying the slapstick humor and exaggerated expressions of the silent film stars. Through watching these movies, they began to grasp the idea that cameras could capture their actions and turn them into entertainment for people in distant places. The strategy worked brilliantly, and the Zulu extras became enthusiastic participants in the filming process, understanding their role in creating the epic war movie that would become a classic of British cinema. Fact 7. Springbok Hunt was geographically so vastly impossible. In one of the early scenes of Zulu, Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead returns from a hunting expedition with his bearers carrying the results of his successful day in the field. Among the animals they bring back is a springbok, a graceful antelope that Michael Caine's character has supposedly shot in the area around Rorke's Drift. While this scene helps establish Bromhead as a typical British officer who enjoys hunting during his leisure time, it contains a significant geographical error that wildlife experts would immediately notice. The springbok is indeed a real antelope species that lives in southern Africa, but it has a very specific natural habitat that is limited to the arid and semi-arid regions of the continent. These elegant animals are native to the dry, open plains of what is now the northwest and western parts of South Africa, along with areas of Botswana, Namibia, and small portions of southern Angola. Springbok are specially adapted to survive in these harsh, dry environments where water is scarce and the landscape consists mainly of grasslands and scrubland. The problem with the scene in Zulu is that the Battle of Rorke's Drift took place in Natal Province, which is located in the eastern part of South Africa along the coast of the Indian Ocean. This region has a completely different climate and ecosystem from the arid areas where springbok actually live. Natal has a more temperate climate with regular rainfall, lush grasslands, and river valleys that support different types of wildlife altogether. Springbok have never naturally lived in the Natal region where the story of Zulu takes place, making it impossible for Lieutenant Bromhead to have hunted one in that area during 1879. The filmmakers likely chose to include a springbok in the scene because it is one of South Africa's most recognizable antelope species and would be familiar to audiences, but they overlooked the fact that it would be completely out of place in the geographical setting of their story. Fact 8. Tom Jones song anachronism on set. Stanley Baker's widow, Ellen Martin, shared a vivid memory from the filming of Zulu that reveals an impossible timeline error in her recollection of events on the South African set. In interviews recorded for the DVD extras of the film, Martin described how she remembered the cast and crew playing Tom Jones's hit record. It's not unusual for the Zulu extras during filming, and how all the warriors began dancing enthusiastically to the catchy pop song, even doing the twist dance that was popular at the time. This memory seemed perfectly reasonable and painted a delightful picture of cultural exchange between the British filmmakers and their South African extras, showing how music could bridge different worlds and bring people together during the long days of production. Martin recalled the scene fondly, describing how the infectious rhythm of the song got everyone moving and created a joyful atmosphere on what could have been a tense and difficult film set. However, there is one major problem with this charming story that makes it completely impossible. The filming of Zulu took place during 1963, when the cast and crew spent several months on location in South Africa shooting the epic battle sequences and dramatic scenes that would make the movie famous. Tom Jones's breakthrough hit, It's Not Unusual, was not recorded and released until 1965, making it impossible for the song to have been played on the set of Zulu. This timeline discrepancy suggests that Ellen Martin's memory may have been influenced by later events, or perhaps she was thinking of a different song entirely that was popular during the actual filming period. Memory can be unreliable when it comes to specific details like songs and dates, especially when recalling events that happened decades earlier. The story itself may still be true in spirit, with the crew playing music for the Zulu extras, but it definitely was not Tom Jones's famous hit that got everyone dancing. Fact 9. Fake shields created army illusion. One of the most impressive visual elements of Zulu is the sight of thousands of Zulu warriors lined up along the ridges surrounding Rorke's Drift, creating an overwhelming sense of the impossible odds faced by the British defenders. However, the filmmakers faced a significant practical challenge in creating this epic image, because they only had about 500 Zulu extras available for the production, which was nowhere near enough people to portray the estimated 4,000 warriors who actually participated in the historical battle. To solve this problem and create the illusion of a massive army, the prop department came up with an ingenious but simple solution that relied on clever visual trickery. They constructed long wooden frames that could be positioned along the hilltops and ridges where the Zulu army was supposed to appear in large numbers. Each of these frames had exactly 12 authentic Zulu shields attached to the front, complete with traditional ostrich feathers mounted at the top to match the appearance of real warriors. The key to making this deception work was placing one actual Zulu extra at each end of every wooden frame, so that from the camera's perspective, it would appear as though there were 12 real warriors standing behind the shields instead of just an empty wooden structure. When filmed from a distance, these shield frames blended seamlessly with the real extras to create the impression of endless rows of Zulu warriors stretching across the landscape. While this technique was generally effective and helped create some of the most memorable shots in the film, the illusion was not perfect in every scene. Sharp-eyed viewers who know what to look for can actually spot these wooden shield frames in certain shots, particularly during the sequence where the Zulus line up for their final tribute chant to the British defenders. In these moments, the artificial nature of some of the warriors becomes visible, revealing the creative but budget-conscious methods the filmmakers used to bring this epic story to life. Fact 10. Michael Caine vomited at his first rushes. During the filming of Zulu in South Africa, the production followed the standard practice of sending each day's footage back to England for developing and processing, then having the developed film returned as rushes so the cast and crew could review their work and make any necessary adjustments. This was an important part of the filmmaking process that allowed everyone to see how the scenes were turning out and whether any reshooting would be needed. Michael Caine, who was still relatively new to major film roles and anxious about his performance as Lieutenant Bromhead, eagerly attended one of these rush screenings to see how he looked on camera in his first significant starring role. The screening took place in a makeshift viewing room that had been set up for the production, and Caine settled in to watch himself in action for the first time since filming had begun. What happened next was far from what anyone expected. As Caine watched himself on screen, he became increasingly distressed by what he saw. In his own words, describing the experience years later, he said that a person came on screen who was completely strange to him and awful-looking. He was horrified by his own appearance and felt that his acting was terrible, with what he described as a terrible voice delivering terrible performances. The shock and disgust Caine felt while watching himself was so intense that he became physically ill. He threw up on the floor of the screening room and immediately rushed out, unable to continue watching the footage. This traumatic experience was so overwhelming that Caine made a personal vow never to attend another rush screening for the rest of his career. He kept this promise throughout his long and successful career in Hollywood, with only one exception. Years later, when he was working with the legendary director John Huston on The Man Who Would Be King, Huston insisted that everyone attend the rush screenings, and Caine reluctantly broke his rule for that single production. Fact 11. Real Zulu king played his ancestor. The casting of King Cetshwayo in Zulu involved one of the most remarkable examples of perfect casting in film history, though it happened almost entirely by accident. Director Cy Enfield had already identified a local radio announcer to play the role of the Zulu king who had led his people during the 1879 conflict with the British forces, and the production seemed set to move forward with this choice. However, everything changed when Enfield met Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who came from a distinguished lineage of Zulu warriors and royalty that stretched back through generations of the tribe's most important leaders. Buthelezi was not seeking an acting role and had no previous experience in films, but when Enfield saw him, something extraordinary happened that would transform the authenticity of the movie. According to Buthelezi himself, in interviews he gave years later, the director took one look at him and immediately noticed something that made him reconsider his casting decision. Enfield told Buthelezi that he could see a strong family resemblance in his features and bearing, and he became convinced that this man would be perfect for the role of King Cetshwayo. What made this moment even more remarkable was the reason behind Enfield's instinct about the family resemblance. Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi was not just any member of Zulu royalty who happened to look the part. He was the actual great-grandson of King Cetshwayo himself, the very same Zulu monarch he would be portraying in the film. This meant that Buthelezi would be playing his own ancestor, bringing a level of authenticity and personal connection to the role that no other actor could possibly match. Buthelezi accepted the part and delivered a powerful performance that helped ground the film in genuine Zulu culture and history. Years later, he would go on to become one of South Africa's most prominent political leaders, but his portrayal of his great-grandfather remains a unique moment in cinema history. Fact 12. Reduced gunpowder for safety created continuity error. Careful viewers of Zulu may notice an inconsistency in how the British soldiers' rifles behave throughout the different battle scenes, and this seemingly minor detail actually reveals an important safety consideration that the filmmakers had to address during production. In the early combat sequences, when the British defenders are firing their Martini Henry rifles at Zulu warriors who are still at a distance, the weapons produce significant recoil that causes the actors' rifles to kick back noticeably with each shot. This realistic recoil effect was achieved by using substantial powder charges in the blank cartridges, which created the visual impact that audiences would expect from powerful military rifles of the 1870s. The strong recoil helped sell the illusion that these were real weapons firing real ammunition, and it added to the intensity and authenticity of the long-range battle scenes where the British soldiers were trying to hold back waves of attacking Zulu warriors. However, as the battle progresses and the fighting moves to closer quarters, particularly during the intense scenes where Zulu warriors break through the defenses and engage in hand-to-hand combat with the British soldiers, the rifles begin to behave very differently. In these later scenes, the same weapons barely kick at all when fired, creating an obvious continuity error that breaks the visual consistency established earlier in the film. This change was not an oversight or mistake by the filmmakers, but rather a deliberate safety precaution that became necessary as the action moved to close-range combat scenarios. When actors were firing blank cartridges in close proximity to other performers, even the reduced powder charges used in blanks could still cause serious injuries, burns, or hearing damage. The film's safety coordinators made the decision to significantly reduce the powder charges in the blank cartridges during these close combat scenes to protect the actors and stunt performers, even though this created the noticeable continuity problem with the rifle recoil that observant viewers can spot. Fact 13. Private Hook character. Completely fictional, one of the most memorable and compelling characters in Zulu is Private Henry Hook, played by James Booth as a rebellious, hard-drinking soldier who starts the film as a malingering thief trying to avoid his military duties by pretending to be sick. Booth's portrayal shows Hook as a cynical, insubordinate troublemaker who steals from the medical supplies and constantly clashes with authority, only to redeem himself through extraordinary acts of heroism during the battle when he leads the defense of the hospital and saves numerous wounded soldiers. This character arc of a flawed man finding his courage in the face of overwhelming odds makes for a compelling drama and gives audiences one of the film's most satisfying emotional journeys. However, the real Private Alfred Henry Hook, who fought at Rorke's Drift in 1879, was nothing whatsoever like the character that James Booth brought to life on screen. According to historical records and military documentation from the time, the actual Private Hook was considered a model soldier who had an exemplary service record and was known for his discipline and reliability. Far from being the drunk portrayed in the movie, Hook was a committed teetotaler who never touched alcohol throughout his entire military career. He was receiving good conduct pay at the time of the battle, which was only awarded to soldiers who had maintained consistently high standards of behavior and performance. The real Hook was also a devoted family man who took his responsibilities seriously, both in his military service and in his personal life. The dramatic invention of turning him into a thief and troublemaker was purely a creative decision by the filmmakers to add conflict and character development to the story. This significant departure from historical fact has continued to cause frustration for Hook's descendants, who have spent decades protesting the way their ancestor was portrayed in the film. They regularly point out that the movie's version of Hook bears no resemblance to the honorable soldier their family remembers, and that historical records clearly support. Fact 14. Joseph E. Levine greenlit based on title alone. Stanley Baker had no trouble securing financing for Zulu, but the way he obtained the backing for this epic war film reveals one of the most unusual and impulsive decision-making processes in Hollywood history. Baker approached Joseph E. Levine, a powerful American producer and distributor who was known for his quick instincts and willingness to take risks on projects that other studios might consider too ambitious or expensive. Levine had already established a relationship with Baker and had previously told the Welsh actor that he would be willing to back any project that Baker wanted to develop, which gave Baker the confidence to approach him about his latest idea. When the two men met to discuss potential collaborations, Baker mentioned that he was planning to work on a new film project that he thought would make for compelling cinema. Naturally, Levine asked what this new project was called, expecting to hear more details about the story, the budget requirements, the potential cast, or the scope of the production. Baker simply replied with one word: Zulu. Without asking a single follow-up question about the plot, the historical background, the proposed budget, the filming locations, or any other details that a producer would normally want to know before committing to fund a major motion picture, Levine immediately responded with enthusiasm. According to Baker, who told this story in radio interviews that were later confirmed by his widow Ellen Martin in DVD extras for the film, Levine's exact words were, "Zulu, I like that title. I will back you." That was the entire extent of their discussion about the project at that moment, and Levine's commitment was based entirely on his positive reaction to the four-letter title. This instant approval, based on nothing more than a catchy title, demonstrates the kind of gut instinct decision-making that was possible in the film industry during the 1960s, when personal relationships and quick judgments could lead to major productions being greenlit in a matter of seconds. Fact 15. Cattle payment circumvented apartheid laws. The production of Zulu took place during the height of South Africa's apartheid system in 1963, which created serious legal and ethical complications for the filmmakers when it came to paying their Zulu extras fairly for their work on the movie. The strict apartheid laws that were enforced at the time prevented the Zulu performers from receiving wages that were equivalent to what their white counterparts earned, creating an unjust situation that troubled director Cy Enfield and the production team. Under these discriminatory laws, the Zulu extras could only be paid at significantly reduced rates compared to white actors and crew members, regardless of the amount of work they contributed to the film or the importance of their roles in creating the epic battle scenes that would make the movie famous. This legal restriction meant that hundreds of Zulu warriors who spent weeks filming complex and physically demanding sequences were being denied fair compensation for their essential contributions to the production. Enfield, who had left Hollywood after being blacklisted during the McCarthy era and was sensitive to issues of social justice, refused to accept this unfair arrangement and came up with a creative solution that would provide real value to the Zulu communities while working within the existing legal framework. Instead of simply accepting the reduced wages that apartheid laws allowed, Enfield made the decision to gift all of the animals that had been purchased for use in the film directly to the Zulu tribes. This generous gesture included cattle, which were particularly valuable in Zulu society and culture, along with other livestock that had appeared in various scenes throughout the movie. In the traditional economy and social structure of the Zulu people, cattle represented wealth, status, and security in ways that went far beyond simple monetary value. The gift of these animals provided the Zulu participants with something that was actually far more valuable to them than the equivalent cash wages that had been denied to them by the apartheid system. The apartheid system. The apartheid system. The apartheid system.